One of my favorite things at Universal Orlando is finding hidden references to previous attractions. And this year during the holidays at Universal Orlando, the park has tons of them scattered throughout their holiday decorations. So in this video, I'm gonna be taking you guys through Universal Studios Florida, checking out some of the decorations in each of the lands, trying to find those hidden references to rides of old, and share with you guys what those experiences were like if you never got to do them. So welcome to another episode of Vincent Vision. Watcha! The holidays are in full swing here at Universal. Tons of decorations all throughout the park. And while this first little Easter egg isn't necessarily a holiday decoration, it does have something to do with this year's holiday design. Things you're gonna see on all the t-shirts that they sell in the park. You can see it best here at the Universal Studios store. They have murals of all the different holiday art this year. One of them is for the holiday parade. It's got Santa Claus, presents, toys flying all around. And on the left-hand side, there is a very familiar Jack in the Box. Do you guys know who that is? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? That is Jack the Clown, the most popular Halloween Horror Nights icon here at Universal. I cannot believe he made it on a Christmas shirt, because if you know Jack like I know Jack, that guy does not celebrate Christmas. I'm loving this little version of Jack here that we have, and it just goes to show you how popular Halloween is here at Universal. It even makes it on to the Christmas shirt. So right as you enter the Hollywood Street, you're gonna see the Brown Derby Hat Shop. This is a seasonal store here at the park. This is where we're gonna get our first hidden decoration here. It's right in the garland, and you gotta look close. These are gonna be really small, okay? They're not super obvious. You gotta be looking for them. But on the garland is a bottle of what is known as, let me see if I get this right, Vitamita Vegemin. Vitamita Vegemin is from an episode of a show called I Love Lucy. It's called Lucy Does a Commercial, and she is trying to promote this product. And you may or may not know, but way back when this park first opened up, there was actually an I Love Lucy attraction here. It wasn't a ride, it was a kind of like a museum of sorts where you could go and see costumes from the show, set pieces from the show. I think they had, if I remember, I think they had like an actual genuine Oscar that the I Love Lucy show had won on display. This was here for a good amount of years, all the way until like the 2000s, until eventually it just became a shop. Currently, there is a Wicked Shop Experience museum thing where the I Love Lucy, the exhibit, used to be. That's gonna be something to keep in mind too. A lot of these decorations are gonna be placed closest to where like the former attraction used to be. And since I Love Lucy was at the front of the park, it was one of the first things you'd see coming in. It's right over here in the Hollywood area, closest to the entrance. Right next door to the Brown Derby is the entrance to the Bourne Stuntacular. This is the big old stunt show here at the park. This used to be Terminator 2 3D Battle Across Time, a show that was added a little bit later in the park's timeline, but stayed here all the way until I think 2017. This was a lot like Jason Bourne. This was an indoor stunt show with 3D special effects, actors that would jump in and out of the screen. It was a very popular show, and there are some references to what used to be here at Jason Bourne. Specifically next to it, there's a facade called Carrozzeria de Paolo. I don't know if I got that right, it's Italian. The top wreath actually has, if you look closely, a silver skull with red eyes on it. Very similar to the T-1000 models from the Terminator movies. It was Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, it was the iconic robots from the Terminator movies. You've got a reference to them right up there in that wreath. And in Do You One Better, another Terminator reference, in the window of that same building, if you look at the motor oil, the yellow cans, all of them say Invader motor oil, with the exception of one. It's a Terminator motor oil, and it's got the iconic Terminator character on his motorcycle with that super cool shotgun. Love references like this. Okay, so there's a really cool one here by the Horror Makeup Show. Hanging down from the garland is an ornament that's stabbed with a bloody knife, and this has to be a reference to Psycho, a classic Universal movie. It's actually had some presence here in the park. Many, many years ago, they actually had a recreation of the Bates Motel and the house all the way in the back of the park, kind of like where DreamWorks Land is now. And what is now VillainCon Minion Blast, it actually used to be Alfred Hitchcock, The Art of Making Movies. And this was kind of like a show experience where you would go in, they would show you how the classic Alfred Hitchcock movies were made. There was like a 3D segment where you were getting attacked by the birds from Birds. And then they would have a scene play out where someone in the audience would recreate getting murdered in the classic stabbing black and white scene, which, by the way, if you never knew, classic Hollywood fact, in order to make the blood effect for that movie, they used chocolate syrup. I don't know if the horror makeup show itself has had any connection to Psycho. They do have some Psycho stuff in the display here, but I think overall, Psycho as a movie for Universal is pretty influential. Alfred Hitchcock. Universal loves its horror, and it loves its psychos.
Free buffet! All at Universal Orlando.
Whoa, I definitely recommend this one.
Great.
So the next reference is a pretty deep cut here at Universal, because I don't think a lot of us got to experience this show, but it's actually over at Mel's Drive-In here. One of the garlands wrapped around the poles here at the restaurant has kind of like a ring on it, and at first glance you would assume, oh well, that's like the hubcap of an old 1950s car because it's a Mel's Drive-In. It's a special type of weapon. It's called a chakram. It's a throwing disc, and this was used by one Xena warrior princess. You see, a very long time ago here at Universal Studios, there is a show based off the very popular 90s show Hercules and Xena. And just like kind of the theme was with everything back then, this was all about how TV shows and movies were made. This used to be where the Transformers ride is now. And it used to be a much smaller building. What's even funnier is before it was Hercules and Xena, a big action-packed show, which kind of makes sense in a theme park, it was actually a show based off of Murder, She Wrote. This was a show very similar to Hercules and Xena, where they would get people from the audience, involve them in the production of a brand new episode of Murder, She Wrote, which is something that maybe my grandma would have really, really loved. So in order to find this next decoration, you're actually going to be getting out of the Hollywood area towards the back of the park. You're going to be passing through Central Park, and the last tree on your left, if you look up, there's a red garland wrapped around, and there is a very iconic vehicle on it. That is the DeLorean from Back to the Future, and that is because in this area of the park, there used to be a Back to the Future ride. You all remember the Back to the Future ride, right? It is now The Simpsons. It was a big simulator, super popular ride here in the park. Back to the Future, still one of the most popular things here in the park. You've got the DeLorean right by the Simpsons area you can take pictures with. You have the train from the third Back to the Future movie, which is the actual train used in the movie. It seems like only New York and Hollywood get sort of the garland treatment. So this one is pretty easy to find, especially as you're heading towards the Simpsons area. So now we've made it over to the New York area of the park. And yes, before you ask, I am getting low for this shot, okay? Because I really like this alleyway, and this is the only way I can film this, is by putting it on a little step like this and getting low, getting this cool shot. That's what you do here at Universal Studios. You make movies. But anyway, the New York area has a lot of references. I would say that this has the most references to old Universal. You can find a bunch of them all around. One of the first ones that I caught was over here at the Film Vault. Almost all the buildings in this area of the park are decorated, but the Film Vault's an actual shop here where you can buy a lot of movie merchandise. So it's all decorated with film reels and movie decorations and glitz and glamour and all that stuff like that. But all of the movie slates, the little clacks, you know, little thing they go like that, action. They have them hanging up above in the windows, and they're all actually film slates for classic Universal movies. So if you look up, you're gonna be able to see things like Jaws, Back to the Future, Ghostbusters, even some fake movies like Disaster by the world famous Frank Kincaid, played by Christopher Walken at the former Disaster ride in San Francisco. Though not necessarily like a holiday-specific reference, there is this sign connected to the Film Vault that I've always thought it's fun to point out, but I never do. It's called Bull's Gym. You might have noticed it. It's got Bullwinkle from the old Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoon. I think the reason that's there is because kind of in this same area, there actually used to be a Rocky and Bullwinkle show in the park. I remember there was a big stage with a big red plane, and like Boris and Natasha would show up, and Rocky and Bullwinkle, these are characters that would be here in the park all the time until eventually they went over to Islands of Adventure, where they have representation over there. It used to be right near this block as well, so that's why I think that sign is there. That's a really fun reference that often goes overlooked. But we're gonna go through the New York area and go check out some more decorations, because this area is loaded with them. So I was grabbing a seat over here in the New York street, right by the Finnegan's restaurant. I was looking up at the windows right above the Blues Brothers stage show, and I actually noticed some decorations in the windows for some lesser represented holidays here. I can see some decorations for Hanukkah, Diwali, and I think Kwanzaa as well. Although small, I'm glad they are getting represented in the park with decorations too. Now, my personal favorite holiday decoration is actually at Universal Studios Florida's most popular ride, Starbucks, kind of on the side of the building, right by the water. And what's really great about this one is you can get right next to it. It is a little tiny shark with a little Santa hat, Of course, referencing the best ride that Universal's ever made, no longer here, Jaws. There's one right here by the window. There's another one hanging up by the exit to the Starbucks. Obviously, you can't talk about Universal Studios Florida without talking about Jaws. In fact, some people still think this ride is here. Another decoration that's very close by, kind of on the steps of the Eagle Warehouse, is a little jet ski. Way back when Universal Studios first opened up, there was a nighttime show called Dynamite Nights Stunt Spectacular. And this was a show on the water themed to Miami Vice. It had boats that would go around, they'd do turns and twists, and there'd be big explosions, lots of action. There was a show on the lagoon, okay? But I'll tell you something that there was never on the lagoon. There was never a ride in the lagoon. Doing these videos, I hear a lot in the park. We're going off on a tangent now. I always hear this all the time. People they walk by the lagoon, and then they point at it and go, hey, that's where the Jaws ride used to be. I'm gonna be a little sassy for a second here, okay? But why would there ever be a ride in the lagoon? Do you think the Jaws ride was just like in the middle of the lagoon and everyone was watching everything happen? No, it's all the way in the back of the park. It's where Diagon Alley is now. They will tear down buildings to build new stuff. Jaws was never in the lagoon. Let's help stamp that out. Let's inform the guests who come to this park who think that's where it used to be. Dynamite Nights, that stunt show, used to be there, but Jaws was never there, okay? So I was hanging out here in the New York area getting some footage, and I almost missed this little reference completely. But here at the Kitty Cat Club facade, if you look at the wreath, there's a very, very tiny mouse. His name is Fievel. He's from an old movie called An American Tail, Fievel Goes West, and actually had quite a presence here in the park. If you remember the old Woody Woodpecker's Kid Zone, there used to be a whole Playland based off of Fievel. But even before that, and this is something that I had never seen before, I had to look it up, there actually used to be a live-action Fievel show here in the park. This was a show with all the characters. They'd sing songs from the movie. I'm kind of having a hard time figuring out the location. It looks like it used to be where the Beetlejuice show was, now Fast and Furious. It's fun to think of how many shows there used to be here in the parks, and now it's kind of flipped where there's all mostly rides here at Universal, but very little stage shows. But yeah, Fievel, a reference here in the New York area, had a Playland and had a show here in the park way back when. Another really popular ride that used to exist here at the park was Kongfrontation. This is where the Revenge of the Mummy ride is now, and this was such a cool ride that I never got to experience. Seriously, this is the only one out of all the legendary Universal rides that I missed out on. You were escaping New York City on a tram that hung up from above. There was giant King Kong animatronics. It sounded amazing. It's something I wish I'd gotten to see, and there is a little reference to the iconic gorilla himself hanging off of the Sahara Traders gift shop. It's right above the entrance, really hard to miss. It's a big old gorilla hanging from the garland, referencing another classic Universal ride. Now, this last stretch of buildings here in the New York area of the park is probably my favorite set of holiday Easter eggs. You got 3 boom, 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 really good ones right by each other. The first one is right by this red firehouse where Rip Ride Rocket passes through. This used to be the entrance to the former Ghostbusters show here in the park. And because of that, on the wreath, you can see some marshmallows with a green ecto-y goo on them. Coincidentally enough, the firehouse is also right by the New York Public Library, which is featured in the Ghostbusters movie, and they also used to do a Ghostbusters dance show on these very steps. The next building over is the Metropolis Tribune. This is just a facade here, big blue building, but the decorations are pretty interesting. It's a bunch of monkeys all on the garland here, and that's because the original version of the Universal Holiday Parade featuring Macy's was the Macy's Holiday Parade, and they would actually get the floats from the Macy's Day Parade and fly them over the next day and use them here in the park all throughout the holiday season. When they did that, they had big floats all on the buildings all around the park, and on this building is where they had a giant Curious George float that stood over the New York section of the park for many, many years, kind of like its own version of King Kong. And then, last but not least, is the Race Through New York starring Jimmy Fallon ride building here. On the side of the entrance, there is some garland hanging over the windows. If you look very, very closely, you'll actually see some little cows with Santa hats on them. And that is because this is where Twister used to be, the fan favorite ride with Bill Paxton, and the iconic cow flying through the tornado that happened on the ride as well. Just as campy coincidence, just the design of the garland. It's using a lot of cone ornaments and kind of twirlies to symbolize a twister. And the last hidden holiday decoration is is actually right by Rip Ride Rocket, and this one was the hardest to find, I must admit. There was a booth that sells merchandise by the roller coaster. Hanging on the garland on the opposite side, not on like the main side of the street, is Rosie the robot from the Jetsons. Now you may not know who this is, but I do. The Jetsons actually used to be a part of a ride here called the Fantastic World of Hanna-Barbera. It is where the Minions is now. It's where Jimmy Neutron's Nicktoon Blast used to be. This is like a simulator ride, pretty much the exact same ride system as the Minions ride, but this was an original day one attraction. I remember riding this when I'd come here to the park, and I loved this ride because I was afraid to ride everything else. So I was very familiar with the Hanna-Barbera ride, okay? It had Scooby-Doo, the Jetsons, the Flintstones. Rosie is on there. She was like the Jetsons robot maid. Very hard to find, but once you find her, you'll say, oh yeah, look, it's a little robot. But from here, we're gonna head over to Islands of Adventure. Believe it or not, there's actually some references to former Islands of Adventure attractions over at the port of entry. We're gonna go find those now. Lucky enough for me, it seems like I didn't have to explore the entirety of this park because all of the hidden holiday references are right here at the front. In fact, they're like right at the park entrance. But there are 3 former rides that are represented here. 2 of them can be found on the same building, the DeFoto's Brother building. This is where you go and get your pictures from the day. The wreath hanging above the entrance actually has a small trident referencing Poseidon's Fury. So Lord Darkanon, if you want your trident, this is where it is, though it's a lot smaller since I last saw it. And then to the right of it is 2 clashing swords, and this is a reference to the stunt show that used to be in that area, the 8th Voyage of Sinbad. Then the coolest one is at the entrance of the Islands of Adventure Trading Company gift shop. It is the red and blue dragon, Blizzrock and Pyrock, from the entrance of Dueling Dragons. Such an iconic entrance has now been made very, very, very tiny and is hanging above the entrance to the gift shop. And there you have it, my friends. Those are all of the hidden holiday references here at Universal. Universal loves to find clever little ways to pay homage to the past that keeps fans satisfied. And what's really great is they're very small, right? You have to look for them. They're not super in your face, not super obvious, but when you find them, and if you recognize it, and you're a Universal fan, it's a great little treat. I'm excited for the holidays here at Universal, and I hope you guys are as well. I hope this makes your holiday visit to Universal a little more fun. But I'm gonna get on out of here. Thank you guys for watching. See you at the next one. Bye-bye.